excited about this presentation. Thank you to Dr. Hall for setting the stage. It's going to flow really nice to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. It's almost like you planned this out.
Thanks, yeah,
something like that. So what I want to talk to you about is a topic I'm very passionate about, something I live and breathe every day. I'm in the trenches with these high school athletes. I've been doing this for a while. We've been open for about 5 years, and we've been fortunate enough to work with some amazing high school athletes. Some want to get to the top level, D1 pro. Some just want to have a good career. Some just want to have a good time. And so we're here to service all of them. And so, skip past that one. Oh, go back. So this picture was taken from 10 years ago. This was at Spooner Scottsdale, so I used to work here. So I thought it'd be kind of funny to circle back 10 years later to be able to talk to you guys today. This was during a Halloween celebration that we did. I was Draco Malfoy, and I don't know which mole or twin that is, and that was David. So it's an honor again to be here 10 years later. This is our facility. Again, we're in Chandler, Arizona. We're blessed to have plenty of turf space, similar layout to the Institute here. And these are some of the athletes we've been able to work with. Whether they want to go D1, whether they want to go D2, D3, NAIA, our job is to make sure that they can get there. And one of the biggest barriers are all the obstacles that they're going to face in their high school career. This is, we already did the introduction, but this is some of the other businesses I'm involved with. So that's a podcast that Dr. Hall mentioned earlier. And that is a skill acquisition company that I am a partner with called Emergence. So if you want to learn more about that, we can talk about that a little bit later. And then lastly, I guess this was the slide update. So this is me in high school. This is a young version of Steph Curry and Allen Iverson. And this was also, so this is freshman year, this was senior year. And I know you're asking yourself, and the answer is yes, I had AOL, and my screen name was JBallin30. So that was me. But times have changed, right? I put that up there because things are different now. 2023, being a high school athlete is the hardest it's ever been to be a high school athlete, in my opinion. They're going through more stuff that a lot of us don't even think about and didn't have to deal with when we were coming up. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with what I call the death of the multi-sport athlete, right? That is not a thing anymore. It really is not. I don't have an exact percentage for you of what I experience, but for the most part, our kids play one sport, and they start playing one sport at 8, 9, travel teams as early as 7. Like it's real. Funny story. We had a parent whose son plays cornerback. He's a cornerback at 8 years old, and he's like, "Look at my son shutting down that side of the field." I'm like, "They don't even pass the ball. It's what are we talking about here?" Volume, specialization. So another way to look at volume, I like to say global load, right? So we think of volume as numbers in the gym, right? But just like Dr. Hall said, it's tests that they take, it's interactions with parents, it's PT appointments, it's skills trainers. We had a kid who was a quarterback, had 3 different quarterback coaches. Every baseball kid has a pitching coach if they pitch, they have a hitting coach if they hit, and they play on multiple club teams. So it's insane. Pressure. The pressure to be great right away is the highest it's ever been, right? We live in a world where everybody sees the highlights, nobody sees the lowlights. And so those highlights are what everybody wants to get towards. And then lack of movement variability, which we'll talk about as well. It's the same stuff over and over and over again. And so, right, more and more kids are playing one sport. More and more kids are specializing early. This is just one of the stats I found. It kind of varied, but 27% play only one sport out of the 60 million kids from 6 to 18. And I think one of the issues that's caused is youth sports has become professionalized. It's become commoditized, it's become professionalized. Unstructured free play is not a thing. And so we have to be able to give some of that back. Autonomy, choice, ownership. These are things that are no longer in the hands of the youth athlete. I'll show you a schedule of what a typical schedule is for some of these athletes, but that schedule is determined for them. They don't have agency over that anymore, right? That is pretty much gone. This is a bigger problem at 6A schools than smaller schools. So some of the bigger 6A schools, you will rarely find a kid that does multiple sports. Volleyball players play volleyball. Baseball players play baseball. Every now and then, you'll get a football player that does track. The problem is, this is typically also a high volume sport, and they're training, and it can also lead to injury, and it's also very linear. So again, the movement variability becomes an issue. And then weather and location play a big factor, right? Typically in states like here, Texas, right, where you can play baseball year round, where you can go to any park and there's someone that has some cones out and they're dancing around, and the footwork kings of the world, they are on every park if you drive around. So it's a big thing. So what are some of the reasons? Right, it's behooves government bodies to show success early, right? So there's pressure. Kids are being guided towards success early, right? We try to identify talent early as well, right? There's that book, I think, by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers, where we identify somebody and then we put them in this bucket of they're elite at 11 or 12. I saw a kid's profile on Instagram and it said 2030 5-star recruit. Like, what are we doing here, right? The internet, the world is littered with early success stories that didn't pan out. So for us to presume that this kid is going to be great at 12, he's going to be great when he's 18, or she's going to be great when she's 18, I think is a little presumptuous. Early recruiting for college sports, this recently shifted, right? So now a lot of the colleges, you have to wait till junior year to offer. I just met with a volleyball coach, D1 volleyball coach yesterday, and now they have to wait to offer, right? Before it was earlier. So that is at least a push in the better direction. Parental pressure, parents, right? Parents often live vicariously. Does anybody have kids in here? Okay, so speaking directly to you guys, hopefully you do a better job than some of the parents I interact with, but a lot of the pressure comes from parents, right? Parents want to provide everything that they didn't have as an athlete, as a person, and sometimes that pressure can be overwhelming. And the reality is a lot of these sport coaches are volunteers, right? A lot of these sport coaches have jobs, right? They are not paid to work with kids. That's just the way it is, right? You don't know what you don't know. So I think there needs to be a better way to educate these volunteer coaches, these high school coaches, on what it actually means to work with athletes. And then a lot of it is money, right? There are ID camps going on right now. There are baseball showcases. So what we tell our athletes is to really look at, like, ask around, is this camp worth my time? Because otherwise you're wasting your flight. If you fly, you're wasting your money. And then also, right, you're stressing your body probably unnecessarily, right? So a lot of it is to make money. A lot of these D1 programs, people don't realize they have these summer camps. That's how they make money. And so, you know, they have the athletes usually work them, so it's free labor. So that's how they make a lot of money. So you have to understand, is this worth my time? And so there's some potential ramifications, right? This is probably pretty obvious, but you know, a lot of knee issues, patellofemoral pain, Osgood-Schlatter's, many other issues that happen, right? There's also, we all have heard about the epidemic in Tommy John issues, right? These are very common things that we hear about, but burnout, right? Burnout is an issue. We have a wall of fame at Ignite with athletes that have gone on to the next level, and multiple times those athletes don't finish. They don't finish college because they get burnt out. You see this all the time. Self-identity. A lot of times athletes will only identify as that one sport, as a basketball player, as a football player, as a baseball player, as a volleyball player. So what happens when you get hurt? What happens when that is taken away from you? And I have, unfortunately, had to experience that with as an athlete and as a coach, right? Where that gets taken away from you, then what do you do next? And the other thing is just like, what if you're wrong? What if your 12-year-old that was a great baseball player stops growing, or your basketball player stops growing, and you're not exposing them to other sports? They need to have a robust experience of multiple sports so they have options as well. So sports, right? Youth sports, it's a year-round job at this point. The major offenders, right? We know volleyball, that's pretty well known. Volleyball is a very long season. Baseball, yes, softball as well should be on there probably. Basketball has something going on called Section 7. I think they might have just had it. That's basically summer basketball. It's this craziest month that you can imagine. I have a kid that is coming off of an injury and he can't even schedule with me because he's just so busy. So he literally does not have time to train. Football is trending that way. Football is starting to do 7-on-7 tournaments, travel tournaments. which kind of begs into question, like how relevant is 7-on-7 to determining whether you get a scholarship or not? I mean, depending on the position, you can maybe argue. And then this is just an example. This is what happened this year. So we had, I think, 10 girls in the AIA finals, and then they had club tryouts the next week. So they were playing, so club, by the way, is, nationals are next week. So they're playing in nationals, and then school starts, I think, the 26th in Chandler. And so they'll do tryouts shortly after that. So it's a little less than a month of actual time off. For like a comparison, basketball NBA season is 7 to 9 months. So, you know, these kids are being treated as professionals. So this is a schedule that one of my athletes sent me of what her day-to-day is. She is a 16-year-old volleyball player, and she's one of the more responsible ones. So this bedtime, they usually don't look like that. They're much later for most kids. So obviously we have the early wake up. We have schools on the one on the left, but we have academy. Has anybody heard of what academy is? So academy is essentially a PE period where they play that sport. So it's essentially a reason to train another practice, right? So she has a practice one, right? She goes home, usually naps, gets homework, volleyball practice that time, training after volleyball practice, get home, eat dinner, go to sleep, and then do it all over again, right? 3 to 4 days a week. And again, that's not including, and again, she comes into Ignite, so what are we supposed to do with that? You know, she's coming in, her parents are expecting a result. Well, we better rip up that plan and change some things. And so that doesn't include, again, private lessons, Saturdays, Sunday mornings. High school season, high school is usually every day, sometimes 6 days a week. This is what the high school season is like. Again, they have academy, so you can see sometimes they play, they lift. In season, sometimes they play. Homework, dinner, practice, right? Depending on if they have a game, it's gonna look very different. That's a pretty wild schedule. Like, I don't know how many of us could maintain this schedule consistently, but yeah, we expect someone 15, 16 years old to be able to do that. So what can we do about it as coaches, as practitioners, whoever's listening to this? We need to be able to tell, like, our athlete's state of readiness. Just like Dr. Hall alluded to earlier, this is something we use. We use 5 different questions and they fill it out. Obviously it's subjective, but at least it gives us an idea of their state that day, right? The other thing is just look, observe, see. If my athletes are warming up, they're talking shit to each other, they're having a good time, they're probably gonna have a good session, right? They're feeling good. If they're quiet, if their energy's low, they're coming in like this, it's probably not gonna be a good session, right? You can kind of tell. Get to know your athletes. You have to get to know who they are, get to know their lives outside of training, get to know what their practice schedules are, get to know their programs. Every high school lifts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's not usually very good. Newsflash, not very good. We also want to be able to communicate, and this is big because most kids will go to physical. There's probably physical therapists in here. Will go to physical therapy. It's our job to connect. Like, if we don't connect, that is just a disservice to that athlete. I had a PT recently who an athlete's now working with me, and he just didn't want to communicate. Like, that's not good for the athlete, right? We need to be able to put them first. We need to be able to put their health and well-being above a 10-minute phone call, a little inconvenience. So this is what every clean looks like on Twitter, by the way. This is what every power clean and every hang clean looks like on Twitter. If you go on Twitter right now, especially like in the football off season, early or late off season, and you get all the kids walking around, and then there's a coach, you probably can't tell, but he's screaming at the kid to get under the bar probably. But usually, right, every high school trains, right? Back when I played sports, it was the football players trained, maybe baseball, but basketball players, you didn't really train, you didn't do that. Now every sport trains, every high school trains, few do it well. Right, it's usually someone who is not equipped for that. It's usually someone who is supposed to manage 50 kids. Maybe it's someone who has followed a program from the 80s, some bodybuilding split, and they usually have these 4 lifts. Right, these are going to be those 4 lifts that they do. Right, it's going to be that. You get lucky if you get like a unilateral exercise, or maybe do something in a different plane of motion. You'll be very lucky if that happens. Usually two things happen. It's either death by volume or it's like 50 kids so they get one set. And so that's where you, as a practitioner, have to know what they do outside of here. There's a very prominent high school that does what they call them 100s. They do in the same day 100 squats, 100 deadlifts in their workout. It'll be 100 military press, 100 chest press in their workout. And so that, I think 2 off seasons ago, we had 3 kids that had torn labrums, 3 football players. And yeah, so it makes sense, right? Again, if it's not on Twitter, it didn't happen. And then so we have to provide some movement variability. We have to be able to do different things because they're already doing that same thing over and over. So I took this from Tim Grover. For those that don't know, he's famous for training Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade. I don't know if he even meant it like this, but I'm gonna go ahead and take some liberty here. But you know, pressure is good, but it's not always good. Pressure can be helpful, but it's not always helpful. We already talked about parents, coaches. I had a coach who told an 11-year-old baseball player who also played basketball that he should quit basketball and focus on baseball and academics. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Why would he miss out on those times, those experiences? He's also 6 foot, so he needs all the coordination he needs. It's like a giraffe. Social media. Social media is a big one. That is a big one that I think unless you grew up with that in that time, we don't fully comprehend the impact that it has. Every kid, this is what they do. They go into a session, they check in, and they snap, or they put it on Instagram or Be Real or whatever. They all do that. This is something that maybe Dr. Hall can start diagnosing as D1-itis. D1-itis is the pressure to be a D1 athlete, and you are lesser than if you are not a D1 athlete. I've had kids come in and kind of like embarrassingly tell me they committed to a D2 school. I'm like, dude, you got farther than I did. That's great. Like, why is that a bad thing? But there's a lot of pressure. There's been kids, I know a kid who committed and then actually never, he just had the commitment and never actually went, right? He did it for the recognition and never actually had any intention of going to school. That happens. Change in the college landscape. COVID has affected a lot. It has affected a lot financially. There is less money available for sports so football, it doesn't matter. Unlimited budgets typically. Baseball, volleyball, there is less money because kids are returning, right? So that limits opportunities. So that adds to pressure. NIL. Personally, I think personal opinion, I think it's great that they're able to make a little bit of money. However, there are some ramifications. I talked with the volleyball coach, and he's a female volleyball coach. The highest paid NIL athletes in volleyball don't play. Why are they the highest paid? Unfortunately, it's how they look. So unfortunately, we're kind of back to commoditizing female athletes. That's a negative side effect that no one really talks about. But it's something that kind of is in the works here that is a potential consequence. So I know some of y'all don't even know what these are, right? There's some people that don't know. That's Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. I didn't know what Be Real was till about 6 months ago. And that's Snapchat, yep. And so the last 2 years, right, there has been a 17% increase in screen use, right? Well, what's happened in the last 2 years, right? Kids are at home, right? They are doing this. Before they go to bed, we talked about blue light, right? They are all doing this. Or they're on Call of Duty. I don't think Fortnite's a thing, maybe Fortnite, but they're all doing this, every one of them. I would put that on like 95%. So unfortunately, right, this is a heavy subject, but this is what's happening, right? I've had multiple conversations with parents about kids who have had these types of thoughts. And I'm like, well, I'm not equipped to this. You should probably talk to someone who's a professional. But these are things that are happening. Our kids they're going through it right now. Like, I can tell you I've had a couple times a year, every kid cries, something's happening, it has nothing to do with the workout, might even have anything to do with sports. There is a tremendous amount of pressure on them. So why variability, right? Variability is, we're gonna go into some videos here in a little bit, but we wanna expose our athletes to various joint angles, right? They do the same stuff over and over again. We need to expose them for various joint angles and kinematics. There's potential for greater transfer to sport. There's a lot of research on blocked versus random practice, right? Whether you go from A, and back to A, or you go A, B, C, and then alive movement problems, where those athletes have to adapt. They're moving in a way that's a little bit more potentially transferable to their sport. There's also some emerging research on reduction of injury risk in introducing more variety. Gives ownership and autonomy back to the athlete, which I don't know if there's any research on, I couldn't find any, but I believe that's something that's very important. And then last, it's fun, and you'll see in some of these videos, just get videos next after this. So this was a study that was in, I believe, 2021. The references will be at the end, but basically they found that these training methods, the motor learning methods, in I believe it was 60 novice soccer players, the ones that induced high variability, reduced their risk factors for a non-contact ACL injury. Going down to this part of it, so NLP is it's called nonlinear pedagogy, differential learning. Basically, right, the more that the athletes were provided opportunities to search, to adapt, to move differently, the lower their potential rate of ACL injury was. So how can we add variability to training sessions? So this is just some ways we do it in the warm-up. Hope this video plays. And obviously there's not much context here, but just so you guys see some of the stuff that we do. So rather than just having an athlete go to a knee hug, whatever you call these, Frankensteins, right, we're allowing them to move in different ways under various constraints, under different loads. Obviously she's having a pretty good time. That was Rob flexing in the background, my business partner. This is something that they set up, right? I kind of gave them some guidelines. We call this architect. They just make a little zone that they do, and they go through, and you can tell they're having a great time. So that's one way, some ways we can do it. And movement strength training, right? This is some different things we can do to add some variability. We do this through jump training. This is a school that we work with, a football team. You can do it with different tasks, different games. That's a great catch, one-handed catch. Again, with some various plyometrics that you can do. Each of them are landing different every time, right? They're landing in a way that is unique to them. This is what we would call a rep without rep, so repetition without repetition, where they're allowed to move in a way that's free, right? We give them some constraints, some guidelines. There's some agility tasks that we do. And again, she's changing the load every time. This is something very simple you can do to add variability. This is, again, some different agility tasks that we do. This guy got shook pretty bad. Yeah, if we could add the volume up, everybody was going nuts. So what can practitioners do? Whether you're a coach, you're a PT, we have to remember what our job is. What I mean by that is, for me, my job is to keep my athletes safe. That's number one. That goes beyond increasing their vertical, getting them faster. It is to keep them safe. Communicate. We need to be able to communicate across professions. We need to be able to bridge those gaps. We need to be able to talk with parents, physicians, PTs, chiropractors, whoever it is. Get to know your athletes. I've already said that a bunch. Less is more, right? I didn't talk a ton about training methodology, but typically we are not going to go high volume. That's just typically what we're going to do. Depending on the time of the year, we will, but less is often more. One thing that's not on there is when you have a plan, we change our plan often. You have to be nimble, you have to be adaptable. We call it softly assembled. So I have this plan going in, and I see my athletes aren't feeling it today. Should I still do this plan? No? Okay. Change the plan, right? We have to do what's best for them. And the last one is the CAR test. At Ignite, we call the CAR test, we refer it to as what the athlete does, the first thing they do when they step in the car after a session with mom or dad. What is the first thing mom or dad asks them? How was your session? How was Ignite? And what are they going to say? Are they going to say it was great? Are they going to smile? Are they going to say, no, it was miserable, it sucked, I hate my coach? And so, even as PTs, how was your PT session? Was it fun? Was it engaging? Did I have a good time? And I think that's ultimately the test of whether we did a great job. And that is it for me. Those are some contact information. If you want to learn more about any of those platforms, the podcast is on any of your platforms where you can download it. And these are the references in case you wanted to look at them.